Hello and welcome to Mindful Living, where we explore the art of living with the intention, balance, and inner peace. I am Avik, your host, guiding you through conversations on health, meditation, mental well being, mindfulness, and the mind body connection. Each episode features expert insights to help you grow, heal, and thrive. So, take a deep breath, relax, and join us on this journey to a more mindful and fulfilling life. So, let's get started.
Hello and welcome, listeners, to another exciting episode on the Mindful Living podcast, where we explore ways to bring more mindfulness, clarity, and joy into our everyday lives. I'm your host, Sana, and today's episode is particularly special for anyone who's feeling stuck or overwhelmed and doesn't know where to turn. Our guest is Alison Smith, an experienced coach, speaker, and host of the podcast Landscaping Your Life. Alison has spent over 23 years helping people navigate life's challenges using nature as a metaphor to help them get back on track. Her unique approach helps people see the wood for the trees by connecting them to the wisdom of the natural world, which is gifted to us. And we'll be diving into how nature's lessons can offer guidance when we feel lost or trapped, and how shifting our perspective can bring us closer to our own inner landscapes. So let's get ready and dive deep into this beautiful conversation with our guest, Alison Smith. Alison, welcome to the show, and it's an absolute honor to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, Alison, you have developed a unique coaching approach by using nature as a metaphor for life. So, if you can explain for our listeners how this idea came to you and why it works so effectively when people feel stuck.
Well, I think it did start in the mid-90s. So that gives something away about my age. When I used gardening as a metaphor for work, and we were trying to get people to listen to what we were, talking about, and they weren't really interested. And as a result of people understanding that a garden needs to be maintained, we might have weeds, we might need to think about where a plant goes in the garden, and we got insight from the managers at work because we were using this as a metaphor. And I think what then happened was I suppose I understood the power of metaphor then. Then I realized that actually as a coachee, I'm quite awkward. And I'm not very good at taking advice from other people. So if you're trying to give me advice, I'll sort of, no, I've already thought about that. That won't work. And then what I discovered was, but metaphor keeps those brick walls, those barriers that I put up down.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose then I went on a journey of, that if metaphor works for me, might it work for other people? And then I suppose what happened was I realized, I suppose because the first time I used metaphor, it was a gardening analogy or a gardening metaphor. And then I noticed that people, when they're stuck, use nature in their terminology. They describe their situation as, I'm stuck in a rut. I want to turn a corner. I'm at a crossroads. I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. I can't see the woods for the trees. Now, depending on where you are in the world, some of those may or may not resonate. But so, for instance, can't see the wood for the trees might be can't see the woods for the trees in some places. Could even be can't see the forest for the trees, dependent on how you use the term wood. But what I realised was, when we're stuck, and stuck meaning there's a gap between where we are and where we want to be, And also the fact that quite often when we're stuck because we can't access any insight about what to do. So we don't know what to do. And we're quite often overwhelmed or stressed. And what I discovered was when we're in this stuck overwhelmed state, we use these idioms. And what I discovered by exploring those idioms was people could find solutions. And therefore, I always imagine that a lot of people, when they're stressed and overwhelmed, it's like their shoulders are really sort of round the ears. And what I've observed over the years is that using this process, people's shoulders go down. It's as if, oh God, that's better. That's better. And so it's just about exploring the idiom or the metaphor in somebody's language. So if somebody says, I feel like I've got my back to the wall, or it feels like I'm talking to a brick wall, I'll say, I don't need to know any more about the situation that you're struggling with. Because quite often, if we talk about a situation we're struggling with, we just get more stuck and certainly get more overwhelmed and stressed because we've already spoken a lot about it. And so we'll just explore the metaphor. You know, if you feel like you're talking to a brick wall, what would you do if there was a wall in front of you? What does that tell you? If you can't see the wood for the trees, what would you do in a real wood?
Lovely, lovely. That makes sense. And your podcast, Landscaping Your Life, uses the metaphor of seeing the wood for the trees to help people gain clarity. So, how do you help people recognize when they are lost in their own forest of confusion?
I don't think I need to do much to actually help people understand they're there. I think what I do though is certainly in the podcast is say which of these metaphors, and quite often they're idioms, resonates most with how you're feeling. Because the solution when you can't see the wood for the trees is very different than if you're wanting to turn a corner or if you want to turn over a new leaf. So I help people identify the metaphor that most resonates with how they're feeling. And then each episode sort of takes them on a journey to help them understand what to do. So if they can't see the wood for the trees, then it would be about what is it about the wood that is overwhelming you. And it's interesting, really, because I think 75% of the time, if you resonate with feeling like you can't see the woods for the trees, you actually do know what you want to do. You're just not doing it. So many times, I either stand there in nature with you or we'll envisage the wood. And when I say, where do you want to be? They'll point in a direction. They'll tell me, oh, I want to be out of the wood. I want to be down that path. I want to be at the other end of that path. So they're very clear about what they want to do. And so the conversation then is, well, why are you not walking down that path? What is it that you're doing that's stopping you moving towards that destination? And quite often it's because it's the fear of missing out. It's the fact that we might fear that we've made the wrong decision. So we don't make any decision, even though we absolutely know what we want to do. We don't take the action because there's a path so if you think about going through walking through a wood, you want to get to the other side of the wood, but you come to a crossroads and you look the opposite way to which you should be going, and you glance something down that path and you go, oh, that looks interesting. Should I try that instead? And I've had a lot of clients who resonate with not being able to see the wood for the trees, where they realize that what they're doing in life is just distracting themselves. They're allowing, as we say here in the UK, shiny magpie syndrome. They're just seeing lots of other things and actually getting distracted by those rather than going, you know what? I want to get to this destination. I'm going to do take every action I can to get to that destination, and then I'll worry about what I do next when I get there, rather than having a conversation with myself saying, oh, well, I might have made the wrong decision, and oh, look, this path looks nice, and oh, I can't, and and we talk ourselves out of action, and we just stay where we are.
Lovely. So, some people they may argue, Alison, that using nature as a metaphor for life's challenges is overly simplistic and doesn't account
Yeah.
for the complexity of personal or emotional issues. Maybe, just a kind of burst out of fear and anxiety. How do you respond to those who believe that metaphors may trivialize real life struggles?
They have to have all I can do is give them an experience of it. So I had somebody the other day who said to me, I'd done some work with them 2 years ago, and they said, when you asked me to pick up leaves to represent the different projects that we were working on, I thought you were mad. And yet 2 years later, I still remember that. I still act on the insight that I got from it. So I think the only thing I can do is give people an experience of it, because you're right. It does sound simple. And in some respects, all I'm helping people do is shift their mindset from being overwhelmed to not overwhelmed. And I think, and it's what I have to try and do is explain to people that when you're overwhelmed, you don't have access to the part of your brain that thinks clearly. So when we're stressed, when we're overwhelmed, talking about the real life situation isn't going to help. If it was going to help, it would have helped by now, because I'm not suggesting, although I do, but I'm not suggesting that you jump and use this technique as the first port of call. People are coming when they've tried more logical means of problem solving. So I've tried this, I've tried that. I'm still feeling stressed. I'm still feeling overwhelmed. And for me, the power of metaphor is you do not have to dive in and tell me any more about the problem, because quite often telling me more about the story that you've built up in your head, and the longer you've had the story, the bigger the story is. And it's not necessarily based on reality necessarily. It's like, I'm stuck. There aren't any solutions. I've tried everything. It's everybody else's fault. I can't do anything. It's like we've got this story going on, and we all do it. I'll put my hand up. I'm the world's best at sort of elaborating on the story to support my current situation. So if diving into the detail of the current situation would help, great. And there are lots of coaches out there that would help you do that. I'm suggesting let's send the story and logical thinking on a coffee break. Let's send it for 45 minutes. We have to tell logic that it's can come back, because otherwise it will keep trying to interrupt while we're doing this more creative process. So for me, there's lots of reasons. One, that if we spend lots of time analysing the situation, we're not going to come up with new insight. And I think the other thing is that, our logical mind is really good at solving problems. But actually, there's another part of us that's creative, and that does think in metaphors, and that does think more simplistically. And how do you talk to it? And if somebody's got a different answer, great, go and do that. Some people might go for a walk. Some people might meditate. There's lots of different ways of accessing our inner wisdom. I just find that metaphor does that. And therefore, what happens is we access a part of our mind that does know the solution, because I work on the premise that you do know what to do. You just can't access it currently. And it's as if we quieten the busy mind, the overthinking, the overwhelm, the stress. We dial that down. And once we've dialed it down and we can breathe, then we see things that we couldn't see when we were overwhelmed. And it's as if when we, in 45 minutes, we come back and say, logical thinking, you can come back from your coffee break. But every time somebody comes back from that coffee break, or the logical thinking comes back, they're no longer overwhelmed and they know what to do. So I think it's just a means of accessing the part of your brain that's there all the while, but we can't hear it because we're overwhelmed and stressed and overthinking about the problem, really.
Yes, yes. Lovely, lovely, Alison. And you live in Scotland and you enjoy activities like walking and open water swimming. So, how do your personal experiences with nature influence your work as a coach and your own journey of staying on track?
When I'm out of sorts, I'll always go for a walk. So quite often with my PA, I might, if I'm sort of caught myself in overthinking and I've got myself overwhelmed and stressed, I might say, right, I'm going to go for a walk. She'll be in the office, she'll be typing away while I'm nattering on, because, yeah, being out in nature helps quieten that, overwhelm brain, I suppose. And so, a lot of my book was written outside. I laugh because a friend of mine's got a cookery organization, and she always says, "Oh, what was your last? Share with us the last photograph you took of food." And mine would be, like last November for my birthday, because I just don't take pictures of food. But if you said to me, share with me the last picture you took of nature, it would have been this morning's sunrise. So, you see what I mean? So I think look at your camera reel to find out what's important to you, and yeah, if nature's your sort of thing, then you're going to be able to use it. I suppose that's the thing for me, is that I enjoy being out in nature. When I go swimming, it's not to swim per se as much as to immerse myself in nature and feel one with nature. And when I'm there, then things are much clearer. But the other thing is that I can see patterns. It's like, in nature, the tide has got a lot to tell us. We might say, "Oh, I've missed the tide," and there's another tide here in the UK or here in Scotland. There's another tide in 12 and a half hours time. And what did you want the tide for? Because that's assuming you want a high tide. You might want a low tide, or you might want a middle tide. If you're fishing, you might want a different tide than if you're going to go swimming in it. So it just enables you to have conversations that don't include any of the detail of the problem.
And one of the metaphors you have used is that storms in nature eventually pass.
Yes, lovely.
Storms in our lives. So, how can someone use this kind of thinking to remain hopeful during tough times?
Exactly that. It's just to look at the fact that no storm stays around forever. So if you were imagining that you were in a storm, you might say, well, what do I do in real life to weather the storm? So it might be, well, I need to get myself safe. It might be about, so you'd in that instance, I think I'd invite you to write a list of what you would do in real life. So you'd get safe, you'd get provisions, because you might be in the house for a length of time, you might be without electricity, etc. So it's like, what can I do to be safe? What can I do to make sure that even when the storm has passed, I've got enough provisions to last? When I go out after the storm has passed, I might be very careful. So once you've got this lovely list of things that you do in a real storm, then you can actually say, well, if that's how life is feeling, what can I do to make myself feel safe? What can I do to be gentle with myself if I'm going back out there into the world? Because I think sometimes if we're out of sorts, and whatever storm in our life we've faced, it's as if we feel as if we've got to get back out there in the world and faced it immediately, running at 100 miles an hour. Whereas actually learning from a real storm is you wouldn't do that. You'd sort of look either way. You'd step out of the house. You'd just check everything was okay. You'd perhaps stay closer to home initially. You'd just be very, very careful and find out about the lay of the land and what's happening where, and knowing the safe places to go. And I think that sort of insight helps us if we're going back out into the world once we've, got over some storm in our lives.
Yeah, that is true. So, for listeners who feel disconnected from nature or don't have access to green spaces, what are some practical ways they can still tap into the wisdom of nature to get unstuck?
Great question. One of my favourites, and this actually links back to your earlier question about people who are a bit dismissive of the fact that it can't be that simple, because I've done this in so many organisations with so many managers and teams, and they all look at me when I ask them to do it, and then they're able to do it, and then they do get insight, and they look at me if how did that happen? So I would ask everybody listening to pick a situation that you would like some insight on, and then to draw the mountain that reflects the current situation. So, to get a pen and paper and to just draw the mountain. Now, this isn't a drawing that's going to take half an hour. This is a 1 or 2 minute, possibly 3 minute exploration of the mountain. It's like, how big is the mountain? Are there other mountains around it? Is it in colour? Are there paths? Are there not paths? To just draw it, and interestingly, everybody listening who's doing this, if we were to look at their pictures, we'd notice that the sides of the mountains were different. Some were steeper, some were shallower, some were really sort of just one line, other people would be a bit more jagged. So the mountain is whatever the mountain is. You've drawn it. That is a representation that your mind has given you for the current situation. Now, I don't want you to think about how to solve the problem logically. This is where we're going to stick with our creative mind. Our creative mind has provided us with this image. And now it's about, well, how can you make changes to that image that you have made that would make that mountain better? Whatever better, because it could be that somebody says, I need to rub the mountain out. Now, some people may be able to make the changes to the image that they've already got. Other people might need to start again and draw a different mountain. So some people might draw less gradient. Some people might add in paths. Some people might add in signposts. One person added in a guide. Somebody else added in like tents and rucksacks. Somebody else realised that when they looked down, when they imagined themselves on this mountain, they realised that they were trying to climb the mountain in, we call them here in the UK, flip-flops. So sandals that are very not great for climbing mountains. So when we look at the solutions we've come up with, the whole idea would be quite often something inside has already changed. It's like, oh God, that feels better. And sometimes we need to analyse it and go, well, a map helped. So what would a map look like in my situation? Or, oh, a tent worked. Well, perhaps that's just been better prepared, that I'm trying. It's as if we're telling ourselves that we're trying, that our project that we've got ourselves overwhelmed about and we don't know what to do in, it's as if we're trying to act towards it as if it's just a gentle walk, and it's a climb up a mountain that's going to take a few weeks, or a few weeks possibly. So it's that, okay, so I need to be better prepared. I need to look at my diary. I need to make sure that I've got time for, health and well-being or whatever it is. But I think what happens when we draw the antidote, something clicks inside us where the shoulders come down and we just go, oh, that's what I've got to do. And once we're no longer overwhelmed about the situation, then we can come up with a long other list of things that we need to do. Oh, I just need to do that. Because I think there's something about sometimes in life, we feel as if we've got to do 10 steps all at the same time. It's like, well, that's impossible. If we're climbing a mountain, we can only do one step at a time. So what's the first step? What's the next step you've got to do? And sometimes that might be there's a storm coming in. I need to get in my tent and I need to wait until the storm has passed, and then I'll come out of the tent. And only then will I know whether I go left or right. Because currently I cannot see. I was talking to a paddleboarder this morning who'd gone out into the beach near me and the mist had come down and he was out in the sea and he couldn't actually see which way was, to come in. So I think sometimes it's about that. If that's how life is feeling at the moment, then what can you do to make yourself feel safe rather than feeling as if the next action has to be in getting out there and running around doing something?
Yeah, that is true. Lovely, lovely, Alison. If our listeners want to connect with you, explore more about your podcast, Landscaping Your Life, and your book, Can't See the Wood for the Trees, and also how you are using nature as a metaphor for getting out all those limiting beliefs, how they can do that.
Landscaping Your Life will find me. So if you use Landscaping Your Life, whether that's on YouTube, whether that's on podcasts, Amazon, and most social media, if you do Landscaping Your Life, you'll find me because Landscaping Your Life is more unique to me than Alison Smith is. There's lots of Alison Smiths out there in the world.
Great, great. Okay, we'll have all the links mentioned in the show notes for our listeners. And Alison, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your beautiful nature-inspired approach to getting unstuck. And it's really incredible how nature's metaphors can help us shift our perspective and find solutions within ourselves. So thank you so much for gracing us with your presence.
Thank you for having me.
And listeners, if you're feeling lost or overwhelmed, remember that the answers may be closer than you think, perhaps right within your own forest. So be sure to check out the show notes for exploring Alison's podcast, Landscaping Your Life, and her book, Can't See the Wood for the Trees, for more inspiration. And thank you to every one of you to tune into this episode of the Mindful Living podcast. Until next time, stay mindful and connected to the wisdom around you. Thank you.